Okay, I wanted to share something with you tonight, real quick. The other day when I woke up, Esther, she always gets up before me, but I get up and she was sharing with me a message that she had heard, uh, and this is a topic that's really been near and dear to my heart for quite some time now. Actually, a very long time because I see how this has affected my life. Even I look back even to when I was a teenager. I see how my parents allowed the responsibility and accountability to fall on my shoulders. And this is kind of what Esther was bringing up. She was talking about how this teacher was bringing up how in the home you see where there's a lot of men who are forfeiting their responsibilities as a man, and you see that there are a lot of women. Of course, this is not 100%, but this is pretty common. It's very common. I would say it's in the upwards of 60 to 70% of homes are this way. You see the man is just off in the distance, disconnected from what's going on in the home and in their children's lives. And then you see the mother just like overly aggressive and running everything, and running the finances, running this, running that. And then the man doesn't even know how to use a dishwasher or a washing machine. And this is actually quite common, to the point where society has made it like it's normal that it's this way. But I want to beg to differ, because it's actually not normal. God has called, and I'm talking to men here right now, especially. God has called you, man, sir. He's called you to be the leader of the home. But we're seeing today that a lot of men are not leaders. A lot of men, they in the house, they kick back, and they think that their spouse is their servant, or their kids are their servants. And they kick back and drink their beer and their liquor and watch their games, and is totally oblivious to the issues that are going on in their children's life. And that's not the actual term. I mean, think about it. The actual term leader, to be a leader, you have to, are you setting an example? The things that come out of your lips, do your actions support and back those things up? Because you can tell your kids and train your kids a certain way, but if you don't live it, the words that you say are just, it negates it. It just negates the things that you say, because what they're seeing will be what impacts their life. Now we're seeing a lot today where you see, even in the church, this is a issue in the home, in the community, and in the church. You see men, they have checked out for the most part, a lot. And again, I'm not saying all, but I'm saying this is an epidemic. This is a problem today. You see, I will say myself, I'm involved with the finances. I do 80% of the budgeting. When Esther and we were raising our child, I was extremely involved in that. And one of the things that I always taught him was accountability and responsibility. So the actions that you take, they have consequences. I did not shelter him. I did not make excuses for him. Okay. And that was one of the struggles in our marriage. Was Esther, she was way more hands-on with him, and wanted to cover and shelter the accountability and responsibility to a certain extent. But then she started to really pull back from that later on. Um you see in the home, though, you see this with a lot of, well, let me even bring this up in the church. You're seeing today in the church, and I brought this up a couple years back, how there's a lot of big mouth women. They just run their mouths. They don't know when to shut up. And then yet you never see their husbands. You never hear from their husbands. Big mouth women and husbands that never say a peep. And a lot of the excuses that are being made for this to justify this is, well, the he's working, my husband works, and this and that. There's always an excuse for something, but is it godly? Does the scriptures back it up? Because we can make excuses for people, but is that excuse just justifying something that we know is incorrect and not right? I will say this. Raising a young kid, a young boy, there comes that point around, I would say 10 or 11, where there should be zero excuses that you're making. Yes, the kid is young, but that is no reason to not hold that child accountable. Because if you don't hold that young kid accountable, then he will never turn into a young man and mature as a young man. Now, I thank God that I had parents, a mom and dad, that did that with me, that they held me accountable, and they let the chips fall where they fell at times. Many times they did. They let the chips fall. But you're seeing today, we're in a generation now where parents are not letting the chips fall. They are right there, they're running there, and they're covering their kids and making excuses for them and being there all the time and meddling in their lives. That's another thing, is my parents didn't meddle in my life very often. And that in itself caused me to grow up even quicker, because I knew that I had to make decisions. You're seeing today many kids at the age of 25 and 30 and 45, they're still living with their parents. They still have a mom right there making excuses for them. They walk lockstep with their mother. You've seen a lot of this where young men and mothers, a very unhealthy relationship, just too close, walking too close to each other. That man is never stepping out from the covering of the mother. And this is where we're having that issue, where you're just not seeing a lot of men rise up today in this hour, because they've been so used to being sheltered. They've been so used to being covered. They've been so used to following mommy's lead. And they've been so used to a dad that just never speaks out because he's too busy at work or he's too tired. And that's the excuse that I can say with myself. For the last 2 years, there were 2 years ago, I was working 55 hours a week, 2 jobs, and I did that for quite a long time, to the point where I was promoted at one of those 2 jobs up to a manager. And so my hours got into the upwards of even 60 hours a week. Now, in the last 2 years, the amount of teachings that I put up never did really, they never went down. I didn't reduce the amount of teachings that I put up. So in other words, I guess what I'm saying is, and let me say this too, more importantly, that my devotional time, that my study time, that my prayer time, that my alone time with God, actually, it did not go down when I was working those kind of hours. It actually went up. I mean, I sought the face of God even more so. I was like, Lord, I need you this much more now. And, especially as a manager, you see a lot of this too, where you see the crew, and I had 29 people under me. And you see that the crew, they if you allow them, they will sit there and be so needy. They will sit there and they will just run to you for every little thing and try to make it where they're never accountable for their stations or their position or for the food that they put out. And I'm talking about here in food service, but maybe it's maybe you're in another area of work. So one of the attributes of a true leader is a true leader knows when to step away and hold an individual accountable. And as a parent, you're a leader, right? You're a leader as a parent, but there's many parents that don't know when to step away. Look, if your son is 25 and if your son is 20, if your son is 18, look, you've got to step away. You've got to let that young man grow up and turn into a man. And we have an epidemic today of big mouth women that don't know when to step away. One of the things that Esther was saying that this teacher brought up was that even if you have a man who is not as aggressive as the wife, that as the woman you have to step back and because if you're always there getting in the way and making the decisions, then that man will never step up into his place. Me, I like to address it from the man's point of view here. As a man, it is your responsibility. I'm talking to the men here. It is your responsibility to rise up and lead. And I say this again, even when I was working in the upwards of 60 hours, I would come home sometime. That's when, Esther, she would mow the yard and she would do these other things because I was very tired. But I still would, did 80% of the budgeting. I still did dishes. I still cooked. I still did things. She definitely stepped up and did more when I was working that many hours, but she had a job herself. But what I'm saying is we're seeing a lot of men here today that don't know how to use a dishwasher, don't know how to wash their clothes, things like that. See, Esther, we share responsibilities. Like I said, she'll go out and mow the yard. I wash my own clothes. I cook. We share. She'll take out the trash. I mean, we help each other. It's not like it's your job, and you're seeing a lot of this where men are just sitting around because they're not because of the way society has, through television, through bad parenting and so forth and so on. You're seeing a lot of men, they have this skewed idea of what is being the man of the house all about. They think being the man of the house is about sitting on the couch, kicking back with their feet on the coffee table and summoning their wife or their kids for beer. See, that is as far as you can get from being a leader. Okay, that has zero to do with being a leader. I want to take you to Ephesians. Ephesians chapter 5. I'm going to take you to verse 21 because, verses 22 and 23, many know of those verses. I mean, you can read that for yourself, verse 22, verse 23, but I'm going to take you to verse 21 because this verse, I'm such a pet peeve when it comes to scriptures being overlooked. And a lot of people just run by certain verses, and that just drives me nuts, because verse 21 is very key. Before we get to verse 22 and 23, see, without verse 21, verses 22, 23, 24, those verses, they won't work correctly. It won't work right. Okay, so let me read verse 21 here. Ephesians 5:21. It says, submitting yourselves, and this is talking about the husband and the wife, submitting yourselves one to another in the fear of God. Submitting yourselves one to another in the fear of God. So, if you guys aren't going to submit yourselves one to another in the fear of God, then don't worry about verse 22, verse 23, verse 24. Don't worry about that. Don't see, just because you're messing the whole thing up. The whole thing is getting messed up. There must be the fear of the Lord in the heart of the husband and in the heart of the wife. There must be a fear of God. And so today we're seeing many, 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 many men who have zero fear of the Lord, and they kick back on their couch and they're doing all this other stuff. They're making excuses about how they're so busy because they're working a 40-hour week or 45-hour week or whatever. But I'm telling you, I worked in the upwards of 60 hours a week, and I pressed in the Lord even more so. I saw his face even more so. I didn't become disconnected. I became more connected. So don't use your job as an excuse why you are being a lousy spouse. Number two, there's a lot of women, again, I call them big mouth women. They don't know when to step aside and let the chips fall where they fall. When the woman steps aside, then that forces that man to stand up. The reason why a lot of men aren't standing up because they're used to having that mommy do everything for them. And then they get married, and now they think that their wife is mommy. So they instead of treating that woman like their wife, they're treating that woman like that overbearing mommy who never stepped aside and let the chips and accountability and responsibility fall on the shoulders of that young man. And this is a problem today. I'm telling you, this is so common. I'm seeing this so very often. Let me give you another example. Have you noticed the hate, the woman on woman hate that where there's a lot of women who can't get along with each other? I want to take you to a verse, because I was teaching in Second Timothy, and I will continue in the next several messages unless the Lord moves me in a different direction. But I'm pretty sure I'm going to be on this for a couple more teachings. But I wanted to point out in the Amplified Version, reading in Second Timothy chapter 3. And, of course, we know this is where in the King James it says, perilous times will come. Well, you get to verse 3 in the Amplified Version, and it says, and they will be unloving, devoid of natural human affection, calloused, inhumane, irreconcilable, and then here it is, malicious gossips. Malicious gossips. Now, when you look up that word malicious, and give you that definition, it gives you a definition of malign, but then you look up that, and it gives slang terms for the word malicious and malign. And of those slang terms that it gives, one is catty, like cat fight, catty. And then the second term it gives is bitchy. Catty and bitchy. So do you know any individuals like that? See, and again, this is what I'm saying here. There's a lot of individuals. Let me point out one more thing here to begin this. Verse 2, it says, for people will be lovers of self, narcissistic, self-focused, lovers of money. Narcissistic, self-focused. And again, this goes right back to Ephesians chapter 5 here, verse 21. Submitting yourselves one to another in the fear of God. Now, when we submit to the Lord, and have a fear and reverence of his word, it changes the way we view things. It changes the way we look in the mirror and see ourselves. In other words, it will drastically cut back the amount of selfies we take of ourselves and put up on Facebook, because we won't be so self-focused anymore. We won't be so worried about things aren't going my way. And this is a problem with a lot of parenting today, is parents are so concerned that things aren't going the way they want it to go. My kids aren't doing what I want them to do. They should do it this way. And then what happens? You start getting over involved and overbearing. And instead of getting on your knees and praying and asking for the Lord to give direction and to light their path, you start trying to get your hands involved. You start sticking your hands in the cookie jar and being overbearing. And then it turns into a habit. And then instead of seeking the Lord and praying and trusting that the Lord's going to direct your child in the way. See, I'm not saying that we don't point the way and lead and have a set of rules and guide and counsel, because that is our job as a parent. But then there's also a time where we step away and allow the chips to fall. That way they can see the consequences of the actions and decisions that they make. And we're seeing a lot of this where parents, they're so overly involved into the point where their kids are 25 and 30 and 35. And then we're seeing a lot of young women today. They're looking for, because in the home, they either didn't have a father there, or they had a lazy father who's just kind of laid back and, just disconnected. And you see a lot of women that's what they're looking for. And see, this is a vicious cycle that keeps going round and round. And so one thing I'll say is, and this is the way it was with my mother and father, and this is the way it is in with me and Esther. We help each other. We don't say, well, this is your job and that's your job. Oh, well, you better do this, or you're my maid. Oh, honey, go get me a tea. Go to 7-Eleven, go get me a beer. Stop. First of all, stop the drinking. Okay, I'm not here to tell you how to live your life, but what I am here to do is encourage you to seek the face of the Lord, encourage you to get into the scriptures, to submit your lives to the Holy Spirit, which will give you a fear and a reverence and respect of the Lord. And when you fear and reverence the Lord, it will change the way you look at alcohol. It'll change the way you look at drugs. It'll change the way you look at marriage. It'll change the way you look at raising your kids. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. So what we're seeing in the church today, it really, if you get down to the core root of it all, you're seeing a lack of the fear of God, which is causing all kind of issues and problems in marriages and in the home today. I'll bring up another topic. Esther was saying that she was, because she was still talking about this teacher who was teaching on this topic. And I was like, yeah, because this is something that really has been near and dear to my heart for quite some time, for quite a long time, for many, many years, I'll say this. But she was talking about a coworker at work. She was telling this coworker how I actually wash my own clothes, because I do. I wash my own clothes. I've always done it, and that's what I choose to do. I just wash my own clothes. And this coworker of hers said to her that, oh, well, how can you let him wash his own clothes? I wash my husband's clothes because I like to go through his pockets and look through his wallet and his pocket to make sure it's not numbers to some other woman in his pocket, that he's been screwing some other woman or something. And I stopped and thought there, like, wow, see, that's part of the reason right there that, there's a group of people who they want that kind of individual that they can control. They want to control the finances. They want to do all the cooking. They want to run everything, because that way they can control and manipulate individuals. And that's it. There's a lot of that going on today too. But Esther was also saying, well, they're not even married. And this is a funny thing about this is it's so funny how people who aren't married are concerned about their partner cheating on them. And this is something I've always said. If you're not married, it's not cheating. If that person you're with is not your spouse, then if they're off with other people and sleeping around with other people, they're not cheating on you, because you guys aren't even married in the first place. You haven't even made a commitment. You haven't made that commitment before God, but yet you're expecting that person you're with to make a commitment before you. That is hypocritical. See, we have to really, like I said, I know that today the way society is shaped through television, through the way people act in the workplace, on Facebook, on YouTube. I mean, it's 2 Timothy chapter 3 is what it is. You're seeing all this. You're seeing 2 Timothy chapter 3 play out everywhere in society. You're seeing it play out everywhere. And people are and it goes back to that people will be lovers of self, narcissistic, self-focused. And this is the core root issue here. Lack of the fear of the Lord produces a narcissistic behavior and attitude. And so when I come to this channel, when I come before this camera, I have a true love for the Lord. I'm not perfect, and I don't say that much because I know you're not stupid. Because if you thought I was perfect, then quite frankly, you would be pretty stupid to think that. I've had to overcome many challenges in my life, and you know what? Today I still am knocking on that door and seeking the face of the Lord, asking the Lord to give me strength to help me overcome areas in my life. So just because I come on here and preach the word doesn't mean I'm perfect. But I tell you one thing I do that I press in the Lord. I press toward the mark of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. I don't place myself in situations that can open the door to me making stupid decisions in my life. Why even bother showing up at the bar? Why even bother showing up at the party? Don't put yourself in places and situations where you are more open and susceptible to sin. See, part of staying out of situations and part of guarding yourself from stupid scenarios and situations is not to, first of all, not even show up in the first place. Don't expect the Lord to protect you and guard you if you're just going to walk into the situations that you don't need to walk and be in the first place. because there's enough situations in life that we're going to stumble into where we need his strength and help in. But if we're going to add to the problem and then just be voluntarily walking into stupid situations, don't expect the Lord to be there, because many times you're going to find that that was the root cause of you falling. So, and I thank God for the many times that he has guarded me from the situations that I've been in that I just stumbled into. So we need his grace and mercy in our life. We will always need that in our life. But let us not use his grace to live a stupid life. And that's one of the things you've always heard me teach here on this channel. Now, I know I'm not the most favorite person, not even by far. I'm probably at the bottom, the bottom of the 5%, the bottom 5% of the most unpopular people preaching the word here on YouTube. But that doesn't bother me. You know, I didn't see. And again, it goes back to, do you have the fear of the Lord? See, the fear of the Lord will cause you not to care about what everyone else thinks about you. When you're looking on to Jesus, the author and the finisher of your faith, then your priorities get rearranged. And so, have you noticed, I'll bring up another point and then I'll wrap it up here. But have you noticed that really that some of the best teachers, they've been through things in their life, and they've been married, and they've gone through things in there. I mean, even the teachers of truth, the recommended channels I have here on YouTube, majority of them, and it's only 5 names I have on the list, but over half of them, they're married. See, when you have made the decision to get married and do it God's way and submit to the Lord, then you will mature at a greater rate. You will have that leading of the Lord if you're willing. You will be, see, like I said, me and Esther, we've been married for 18 years now. Marriage changes you because it's God's way, and that's what God meant. That was his plan for our life. His plan was not for us to be shacking up and doing all this other stuff. It's to get married and to submit to him, one to another, in the fear of the Lord. And so when we do it his way, then we will grow at a faster rate than, being a moron, being stupid. I want to end the message with Ephesians 4:14. And, you can read verses 11, 12, and 13, which leads up to 14 here. Very key verse, though. It says that we henceforth be no more children, tossed to and fro and carried about with every wind of doctrine, by the sleet of men and their cunning craftiness, whereby they lie and wait to deceive. That we henceforth be no more children. In other words, it's time to grow up. It's time to grow up in the faith. It's time to grow up as a leader in the home. It's time to be a godly husband and a godly wife, not a big mouth wife, not a disconnected husband who just sits on the couch and just, drinks beer. It's time to grow up. It's time to mature. And see, when it all starts with the home, and then, from the home, it affects the community, and the community affects the church. And so we're seeing all the mess in the church as a result of what's going on in the home and what's going on in the community. And so that's something that we should really take a look at. We should really examine ourselves to see that we are truly walking in the faith, and we are truly putting our trust in the Lord. And see, and in raising kids, anyone who's a parent, there's many things that are out of your control. And if you're not putting, if you're going to be that overbearing parent, then you're going to mess everything up. You have to, there's that place where you have to trust the Lord. You have to put it in his hands and walk away. That's something I even learned as a manager. Many times I just had to turn around and walk away and let the chips fall. Well, anyway, that's my message tonight. I pray that spoke to someone. But anyway, until next time, I just pray that the grace, peace, and love of our Lord Jesus Christ be with you all. God bless you, and good night.